I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only one left in the world. But I knew better. I had seen the signs, felt the distance growing between us, and tonight, I had finally decided to confront her. The hallway lights flickered as I stepped inside, casting long shadows on the walls. My footsteps echoed softly, each step heavier than the last. I could hear the faint sound of music coming from the living room, something soft and melodic, but it did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. As I rounded the corner, I saw her. She was sitting on the couch, her back to me, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked so serene, so innocent, but I knew the truth. I had seen the messages, the late-night calls, the way she would disappear for hours without explanation. "Sarah," I called out, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. She turned slowly, her eyes widening in surprise. "John, what are you doing home so early?" I didn't answer right away, instead letting my gaze travel over her. She was dressed in a simple blouse and skirt, nothing out of the ordinary, but there was something about the way she sat, the way she held herself, that made my blood boil. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my tone colder than I intended. Her expression shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing her face before she scolded into a mask of innocence. "I was just relaxing after a long day." "Relaxing," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that what you call it?" She frowned, confusion replacing the guilt. "What are you talking about, John?" I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides. "Don't play dumb with me, Sarah. I know what you've been up to." Her eyes widened again, this time with genuine shock. "John, I don't know what you think you know, but..." "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. "I found the messages, Sarah, the ones you thought you deleted." Her face paled, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it, might try to lie her way out of it. But then she sighed, a heavy, resigned sound that made my stomach churn. "John, please, let's talk about this later," she said, her voice pleading. "I don't want to argue." "Too late for that," I muttered, taking another step forward. "You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on me." Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I used to love. "I didn't cheat on you, John, not in the way you think." "Oh, really?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Then how do you explain the messages, the calls, the fact that you were out until 3 in the morning last night?" She flinched as if I had struck her, and I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I needed answers, needed to understand how she could do this to us. "John, it's not what you think," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Please, just listen to me." But I was beyond listening. All I could see was red. All I could feel was betrayal. "No, Sarah, I'm done listening. I'm done making excuses for you. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and now you expect me to just forgive and forget?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you, John. Please, just give me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "That you're some kind of victim? That you had no choice?" She flinched again, and I almost regretted the words, almost wanted to take them back. But the pain was too raw, too fresh, and I couldn't let it go. "John, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just sit down and talk to me. Let me explain." I hesitated, the rational part of my brain screaming at me to listen, to give her a chance. But the anger, the hurt, it was too much. It clouded my judgment, made me reckless. "Fine," I said finally, my voice tight. Explain. But make it good, Sarah. Because if you lie to me again. She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. Thank you, John. Thank you. I watched her, waiting for her to speak, but she seemed to be struggling for words. Finally, she took a deep breath and began. It started a few months ago, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was feeling lonely. You were always working, always busy, and I just needed someone to talk to. So you found someone else. I finished for her, bitterness lacing my words. She shook her head. Not like that, John. It wasn't about sex. It was about connection, about feeling wanted, needed. By who? I demanded, my patience wearing thin. Who was it, Sarah? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. It was Mark, she admitted finally, our neighbor. My stomach dropped, and I felt sick. Mark, the guy who lived next door, who we had dinner with, who I considered a friend. How could she do this to me? Mark, I repeated, my voice hollow. You were cheating on me with Mark. She shook her head quickly. No, John, it wasn't like that. We never did anything physical. It was just talking, flirting, maybe, but nothing more. I stared at her, disbelief warring with anger. You expect me to believe that? I swear, John, she said, her voice earnest. I would never do that to you, to us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying, that she was hiding something, and the more she protested, the more I doubted her. Why should I believe you? I asked, my voice cold. After everything you've done? She flinched again, and I could see the hurt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal, the pain. John, please, she begged, just give me a chance. Let me prove to you that I still love you. I didn't answer right away, torn between wanting to believe her and the fear that she was just playing me. But then, something in her eyes, something vulnerable and real, made me hesitate. Fine, I said finally, my voice softer, but if you're lying to me, Sarah, if you're lying to me. She nodded quickly, relief flooding her face. I won't, John, I promise. I watched her, trying to read her expression, trying to find any hint of deceit, but all I saw was sincerity, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth. All right, I said, my voice firm, but this isn't over, Sarah. We're going to figure this out, together. She nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Together, she echoed. And for the first time since I walked through that door, I felt a glimmer of hope, but as I looked at her, as I tried to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman who had betrayed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over.